I could certainly improve on a few things. I think I could have stated some better things. She was telling the truth, Joni Lamb believed. However, the web had different plans. Her most recent interview sparked a massive social media outrage just hours after. Longtime fans abandoned the show as shocking claims surfaced. Was it merely a verbal blunder, or what? What specifically did she say that sparked such a strong reaction? Stay with us because what's happening right now has the potential to alter everything we believe to be true about Joni Lamb. Joni Lamb's recent interview was supposed to be her big return. Now was her opportunity to set the record straight after months of rumors, family issues, and negative publicity. Even the title of the interview, The Real Joni Lamb, was obviously intended to convey the interviewee's candor and openness. Those who watched hoped for the truth, and perhaps some compassion. Rather, what they witnessed seemed less like an honest moment and more like a carefully planned performance. Joni wasn't simply there to talk, and that much was immediately apparent. She was prepared to lead. She seemed too ideal in every way, including her body, voice, and smile. She talked softly, pausing as if she had practiced. She described her life and how, in difficult times, she always resorted to God. She described how, when she was a little girl, she addressed a letter to God pleading with him to guide her in life. Although it was heartwarming, it also appeared that she was not being authentic with the people she was speaking to and was instead depending too heavily on a prepared script. The fact that she avoided discussing the topics that initially sparked conversation was even worse. Her marriage to Doug Weiss, which took place only a few months after the death of her husband Marcus Lamb, was not well publicized. It was the room's largest issue. She talked about her sadness and said that it was all part of God's plan and that she relied on him for strength. However, the schedule was unclear to the viewers. She made reservations for a honeymoon with Doug just under 10 months after Marcus's passing. Perhaps even before to their engagement. That did not sit well with the others in the room. She attempted to pretend that God had a plan, but everyone could see through it, rather than being open about how quickly that connection was progressing. They weren't buying the "God told me" line this time. They wanted accountability, not justifications. By sharing tales about her spiritual strength, Joni appeared to be attempting to hide the true issues. Then she was questioned about her son Jonathan Lamb's leaked tape. Online attention was already being generated by these videos, in which Jonathan accused his mother of deceiving and controlling him. When questioned about it, Joni remained silent. She claimed that because YouTube videos and podcasts were so full of lies and half-truths, she had never seen any of them. However, her team had already released videos refuting those claims, so that didn't make sense. How could she know what to fight for and not give a damn? It seems to contradict itself. After hearing this response, people became even more irate. Instead of confronting the truth, she pretended that nothing mattered. Instead of acknowledging that she might have been mistaken, she gave the impression that someone was circulating false information about her. People seldom gave themselves much thought, although it took a long time. No genuine explanations or apologies were offered. It was really a defensive wall masquerading as a spiritual quest. Joni's attempts to put things right were obviously unsuccessful by the end of the interview. Rather of softening herself, she came out as distant and icy. Despite her attempts to alter her tale and her omission of key details, people perceived her as a powerful lady. It might have been a moment of impact. You could have benefited from it. Instead, it worsened her reputation. Observers were much more perplexed, suspicious, and disappointed than they had been previously. When Joni Lamb remarried, everything changed. What ought to have been an individual's private decision became a contentious issue. The internet went berserk when Joni stood next to Dr. Doug Weiss and said, "I do." This was a few months after the public death of her husband Marcus Lamb, with whom she had founded a ministry and publicly grieved. Everyone was initially confused. Following that, several inquiries were received. When did they start dating? When did the partnership start? Did God really lead this marriage, or was it too soon to be true? The schedule was of no assistance. According to Joni, she had been devastated by Marcus's passing. But after being married, she was prepared for her honeymoon in less than 10 months. That disparity didn't seem to be closing for many. There seemed to be a shift. And let's face it, Joni's career was founded on family values, faith, and commitment. For years, she had stood with Marcus on Daystar, speaking about spiritual honesty, marriage, and commitment. People were both surprised and saddened when she remarried so soon and with a person who was already well known on the network. It felt similar to whiplash. A few viewers felt deceived. They recalled her melancholy performances following Marcus's passing. The quiet moments, the prayers, the sobbing. They weren't the only audience for those shows. It was a period of mutual sorrow. Those tears could have meant something quite different now. Was she truly depressed, or was she simply letting the cameras roll and moving on? It was made worse by Joni's actions or lack thereof. In her public speeches and interviews, she frequently used spiritual language. She described how God had brought her to Doug in the moment he did so. She described the second marriage as a precious gift from God that had been prearranged. However, that felt like a change to many. There was no doubt about God's plan. They wanted to ask Joni some questions. Additionally, there was the issue of being forthright and truthful. The truth was what fans wanted. Joni appeared determined to make the reunion appear faultless, well-planned, and ideal, even though they wanted her to say something along the lines of, "Yes, it was quick," or "Yes, I had trouble with the timing too." She said that everything had transpired on its own and that she had waited long enough. However, viewers were aware of the time frame. They witnessed that. They read the news articles. They were observing. Since no one was truly at risk, everything was worse. Social media didn't hold back. On Facebook, Twitter, and even in the comments section of YouTube videos, fans expressed their ire. Many of them expressed their disappointment in lengthy, depressing blogs about how they had looked up to Joni. Some posed challenging queries. Was there a connection between her new love and her sadness? She was accused by some of disparaging Marcus' memory. And there were dozens of people who didn't believe her for everyone who stood up for her. Joni was most hurt, or at least it appeared to be. People seemed to be against her. For decades, her admirers had supported her. People who stood by her side, prayed, laughed, and wept. Now she was being called out by many of those same folks. However, Joni appeared to back down rather than show humility in response. She occasionally claimed that the criticism was meaningless. She claimed she had little interest in the negative aspects. She had reportedly not listened to, read, or listened to the podcasts. It didn't help her cause, but it might have been the case, or it might have been a strategy to keep from acknowledging how hurt she was. Rather, it distanced her, as if she didn't give a damn about the feelings of her audience. The recordings of her son Joni Lamb speaking out were then released. He questioned why the wedding was taking place so soon and alluded to more serious issues inside the family that were exacerbating the situation. Fans weren't the only ones concerned. Her own son was the one. Individuals started to see the wider picture. Perhaps more was happening behind the scenes than Joni was disclosing. This would be the case if Susie, Jonathan's wife, voiced her reservations, and if members of the church were quietly departing. The hasty marriage to Doug Weiss wasn't just due to love. It was about trust, time, and appearances. This marriage was meant to be Joni's fresh start, an opportunity to demonstrate her strength following a traumatic experience. However, it appeared to many that she had skipped a page. The melancholy seemed hurried. It seemed like a forced healing process. Not a syllable of strength made it through either. The rule was to keep away. Sadness is greatly valued by religious people. It's more than just depressing. It serves as a means of remembering the deceased. Though there is no established period of time for mourning, many believe that Joni's hasty remarriage violated an unwritten tradition, particularly when she couched it in spiritual terms, making it seem as though anyone who didn't accept it was doubting God. Many people were upset. But it was more than the marriage. It was about faith. People trusted Joni to be open and honest with them, sharing her highs and lows. When she leaped to the next mountain peak and skipped over the valley, they felt abandoned. In the end, more than just Joni's personal brand suffered. It reached Daystar, her family, and her religious convictions. Additionally, more people believed she was using her faith as a shield to avoid accountability the more she attempted to claim that the marriage was God's will. If Joni had realized how embarrassing, painful, and complicated this moment was, it could have been different. She could have been accepted with respect if she had stated, "I know this seems fast, and it's been hard for people to understand." Instead, she highlighted the shortcomings by attempting to make everything seem flawless. The image is now fragmented. The marriage that was meant to be a celebration of recovery has turned into a point of contention, and the faith has been shattered. Many people were hoping to hear the truth, not a softer, more spiritualized version, or a version of the truth, when Joni Lamb performed her eagerly anticipated interview. Most importantly, they wanted her to handle the most significant issues that had plagued them for months. Daystar has been the subject of numerous issues and speculations, including her remarriage and leaked videos. The major issue that everyone was aware of. It is large, weighty, and difficult to overlook. Even though Joni discussed it frequently, she never fully addressed it. Things went south at that point. The conversation appeared to have potential at first. Additionally, Joni seems prepared to share her perspective. She smiled gently. She spoke steadily. She discussed how close she felt to God, her beliefs, and her past. Everything resembled the Joni that people had spent years watching on television and in films. However, it was immediately apparent that this would not be the interview that most were hoping for. Joni concentrated on what she believed the audience would like to hear rather than what they needed to hear, since she didn't want to address the difficult questions. She talked of falling in love and losing someone in her teens, as well as her early years and penning notes to God. She also discussed how such experiences had influenced her spirituality. They discussed how they co-founded Daystar and how their mutual love and devotion to God enabled them to create a ministry that impacted millions of lives. Furthermore, people weren't viewing those stories, despite the fact that they were significant and heartwarming. They wanted Joni to address the elephant in the room in a straightforward manner. And the longer she delayed, the clearer it became. When questioned about receiving her first public criticism, she had the opportunity to elaborate. Joni remained silent about it. She claimed not to have listened to any of the leaked tapes or podcasts featuring her son Jonathan. She claimed to have no idea what people were discussing. However, the majority of viewers disagreed with that assertion. This is due to the fact that Joni's team had previously responded to those videos and podcasts. They had made public statements. They had produced videos of their reactions. So how was Joni able to claim that she had not seen or heard anything? It seemed like a way out at that moment. The elephant in the room became much more obvious because her audience must have been in a great deal of agony and bewilderment, or worse, she might have assumed they wouldn't notice the contradiction. At the time, many people were considering a number of questions. Why is she unwilling to discuss the tapes? How does she respond to Jonathan's remarks? It was more than simply remarriage. It was about establishing trust and being truthful. When Joni was questioned about the criticism, viewers of the interview found it difficult to stay attentive. She remained silent. She discussed God's plan and how she remained resilient in the face of adversity. Although she never discussed the specifics, she publicly presented herself as someone who had been wrongfully singled out by lies and rumors. Not after her second marriage to Doug Weiss. The fact that her trip was planned before she was even engaged annoyed them. Not the allegations of abuse being concealed by family members. Not the allegations of financial mismanagement by Daystar. Nothing. When people kept quiet about the difficult things, it got worse. Because silence is preferable to words when things are this horrible. While people do not demand perfection from their leaders, they do demand honesty. Joni refused to speak candidly about the most pressing issues, leaving many feeling misled, confused, and frustrated. Not everyone believed it to be genuine, even when she was crying or her voice was trembling. Some viewed it as damage management, rather than expressing genuine sorrow or regret, the tears appeared to be there to soften the narrative and elicit sympathy for the individual. The feelings didn't carry the weight they deserved because it was unclear how to respond to the difficult questions. Instead of appearing feeble, they appeared to be a part of an act. Even genuine tears can seem phony if you're not sincere, but it doesn't mean Joni wasn't truly depressed. Then the deepest quiet fell. There were allegations of domestic violence. These whispers and myths that no one knew about were no more. Her son, his wife, and others who knew her well in the past gave them names. Claims were serious and unambiguous. Joni didn't even attempt to touch them, though. The big, heavy elephant in the room was still there at the end of the conversation. "We're doing everything we can to look into this," she didn't say. "We take these claims seriously," she didn't say. "They're false," she didn't even say. Although they didn't seem real, the people who watched, including the thousands of people who trusted Daystar for the truth and spiritual messages, said it was real. That hurt the most because people remember when you push something that important aside. They start to suspect what else is being kept secret or not discussed. People didn't want things to be perfect, they wanted the truth. But Joni made a different decision that would have helped a lot, one that made her look less like a leader who was hurt and more like someone who was trying to change the script and hope no one would notice the chapters that were missing. They saw, though, and are now talking louder than ever. Joni had an hour to talk about it, but she walked around it like it wasn't there the entire time. This resulted in the loss of a huge opportunity because she didn't use the time to establish trust, instead adding to the things that were still unknown. People looked to Joni Lamb for years as a source of strength and hope. Someone who walked into the cameras with self-assurance and a Bible in their hand. These scandals about her and her family are no longer just a threat to her image. They are making people who used to believe in her lose hope. There have been more than a few mistakes or confusion. There are a lot of deep, scary claims that have made people wonder what's really going on behind the scenes. It didn't all fall apart at once. At first, there were only uncomfortable questions about when Joni remarried Doug Weiss, how quickly her emotions changed after Marcus' death, and how her personal life began to look very different from the spiritual image she worked so hard to keep up. But then there were the recordings, the statements from her son Jonathan, the claims of abuse in the family, the claims of cover-ups, and the claims that Daystar had mismanaged money. With each new reveal, people became more uncomfortable. This wasn't the Joni they thought they knew. Many people are still trying to understand what the abuse claims mean. Jonathan and his wife Susie say that Joni's granddaughter was involved in some troubling events, and things that they say were kept quiet to keep things looking good. If that's true, you've failed in your spiritual life as well as your moral one. One of the worst things about this is how much it hurts the people who loved and watched her for years. Some viewers of Daystar Daily believed that Joni could help them emotionally and looked up to her as a mentor or even a role model. Even after all of the public criticism, Joni has yet to directly address these accusations. Her silence speaks louder than words, as she has not been truthful in her defense, instead claiming that the accusations are untrue, that the critics are trying to ruin her family, and that the attacks are part of a spiritual war. From the outside, it appears as though she is denying any wrongdoing, but the more she denies it, the more people begin to wonder what she is hiding. The money is the real problem, especially the accusations that Joni spent church funds on herself, such as her honeymoon with Doug Weiss, which occurred shockingly soon after Marcus's death. Although Joni did pay those bills back in the end, the fact that they were ever charged to the church makes many angry, and it makes you question where the boundaries are between your personal and professional life. Faith-based networks rely on donations and viewer trust. Viewers believe that their money will be used to spread the gospel, support the community, and sustain the station, not to fund costly trips or other unnecessary expenses. As a result, when documents revealed that Joni's personal life was connected to her use of church credit cards, people felt deceived and betrayed, and the consequences have been terrible. Churches that once praised Daystar are gradually drifting away from him. People who used to work there or know someone who does now have begun coming out, sharing stories that paint a very different picture than the one Joni attempted to paint in her recent interview, and the issue is no longer one of public relations, it's about hope. There are people who are leaving Daystar permanently, while others are still waiting for Joni to come forward and tell it like it is. without any spiritual spin or carefully crafted story. Because that's what people really want right now. There won't be any more testimonies or sad stories. Just the truth. Of course, it's not all black and white. People want to know how Joni can talk about grace and forgiveness in front of a camera when she is accused of hiding abuse, mishandling money, and not accepting responsibility. Joni has made a lot of friends over the years, and some people still trust her. They believe the accusations against her are baseless and are being made out of jealousy or exaggeration. More and more people, even those who back her, think that things need to change. They think that the silence can't last forever and that the bigger scandals that no one wants to talk about can't be ignored any longer. So many spiritual leaders have lost their way in the world, and Joni's story is beginning to look like just one more painful part in a long line. As a warning that even people who preach righteousness are only human and can make mistakes, lie, and protect their reputation instead of doing what is right. And maybe that's the part that viewers find harder to understand. Because if Joni Lamb, who is loyal, strong, and well-liked, can get caught up in this mess, what does that say about the system that let it happen? What does it say about religion, the church, and ministry? A lot of people still don't know the answer. They are still thinking about it and trying to hold on to what they used to believe. However, there is no doubt that the more significant occurrences involving Joni Lamb have altered everything, causing a rift in the foundation where security and confidence once existed. And for a lady who was once a picture of unflinching faith, it is the true sorrow.